She had nothing, no roof over her head, no family to call her own, and no hope left in her heart. Day after day, she sat outside cafes watching people walk past, holding out her hand, praying for a coin or two just to silence the hunger clawing at her stomach. But one winter morning, when the world seemed colder than ever, a stranger placed not coins, but a steaming cup of coffee in her trembling hands. That single gesture, simple, human, and unexpected, would light a spark inside her. From that moment, her story changed. She would rise from the sidewalks where she once begged to the shining glass towers of the corporate world. And it all began with a cup of coffee. The city was always alive with noise, horns honking, footsteps rushing, laughter spilling out of restaurants, but to her, it was just a blur. She sat hunched outside a cafe, knees pulled to her chest, her thin jacket no match for the biting December air. Every morning was the same. People in warm coats and polished shoes hurried past, sometimes glancing at her with pity, more often ignoring her as though she were invisible. Her name was Emily, though no one asked anymore. She had once been someone's daughter, a little girl who loved bedtime stories and warm milk. But that life had slipped away when tragedy struck. Her parents died in a car accident when she was 15, leaving her in the care of relatives who saw her as nothing but a burden. The shouting, the slaps, the neglect, it all grew unbearable. One day, she ran. And running meant the streets became her home. For years, she survived on scraps, shelters, and the occasional kindness of strangers, though most days kindness was scarce. On this particular morning, Emily sat on the cold pavement, her hands trembling not just from the weather but from exhaustion. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, and her stomach twisted painfully. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Please, just enough for bread." A few people tossed coins without stopping, but most looked away. Then, as she lowered her head in defeat, she saw a pair of shoes stop in front of her. She looked up. A man stood there, holding a paper cup from the cafe. He wasn't dressed like the others who hurried by, his coat was modest, his shoes scuffed, and his eyes, kind. Without a word, he knelt down and handed her the cup. The warmth seeped into her frozen fingers, and the smell, rich, sweet coffee, wrapped around her like a blanket. "Drink," he said gently. She hesitated, then lifted it to her lips. The heat burned, but it was the most beautiful taste she had ever known. Tears filled her eyes, not because of the drink, but because for the first time in a long time, someone had looked at her, really looked. "What's your name?" the man asked. Emily," she stammered. He nodded. "I'm Daniel. You shouldn't be out here like this. Do you want something to eat?" She swallowed hard, torn between shame and hunger. Finally, she nodded. Daniel went inside, returned with a sandwich, and handed it to her. As she devoured it, he sat beside her on the curb, ignoring the stares of passers-by. For 30 minutes, they talked. Emily told him bits of her story, pieces she rarely shared, while Daniel listened without interruption. When he stood to leave, he handed her a small card. "Come here tomorrow. Same time. I want to see you again." On the card was the name of his small local coffee shop, not far from where she sat. Emily clutched it like treasure. That night, under the dim streetlights, she whispered a promise to herself. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance. The next morning, Emily stood nervously outside Daniel's shop. She had almost convinced herself not to come, terrified it was some cruel joke, but something inside her pushed her forward. When she stepped in, warmth enveloped her, warm light, the smell of fresh pastries, the hum of soft music. Daniel spotted her immediately and smiled. "Emily, you came." He guided her to a corner table and brought her another cup of coffee, this time with cream and sugar. As she sipped, he asked about her life, school, dreams, the things she liked. Emily spoke hesitantly at first, but soon words tumbled out. She admitted she had once loved reading, that she used to dream of being a teacher, that she still remembered math problems her father used to help her with. Daniel listened, nodding, his eyes never showing pity, only interest. "You're smart," he said firmly. "Smarter than you realize. You shouldn't be on the street." Emily laughed bitterly. "What choice do I have?" "There's always a choice," Daniel said quietly. Over the next weeks, he made sure Emily had food, clean clothes, and a safe place to stay. He introduced her to the small staff at his cafe, letting her wash dishes and sweep floors in exchange for a few dollars. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and for the first time in years, Emily felt useful. Slowly, she began to change. She brushed her hair, lifted her head higher, and even smiled again. Customers noticed her, not as a beggar but as a young woman with bright eyes and quick wit. One evening, after closing, Daniel handed her a stack of books. "If you still love learning," he said, "start with these." Emily devoured them by candlelight: novels, history, even business basics. She had forgotten how hungry her mind was. Within months, she began helping Daniel with small tasks, balancing accounts, organizing schedules, suggesting ways to attract more customers. Her ideas worked. Sales grew, and Daniel often chuckled, "You've got the brain of a businesswoman." Emily blushed, but inside, a seed of hope was growing. Still, she battled fear. At night, she lay awake asking herself, "Do I deserve this chance? What if I fail?" But every morning, when Daniel handed her coffee with that same kindness as the first day, she found strength to keep trying. One rainy afternoon, as she wiped tables, Daniel sat across from her. "Emily," he said seriously, "have you ever thought about going back to school?" She froze. The thought terrified her. She hadn't stepped into a classroom in years. But then she saw the sincerity in his eyes and whispered, "Yes, I have." That night, Emily walked past the place she once begged, now clutching her books close. She no longer sat outside watching life pass by. For the first time, she was walking toward a future. Returning to school wasn't easy. Emily was older than most of her classmates, her clothes were modest, and whispers often followed her. But she kept her head high. Each day, she studied relentlessly, determined not to waste the chance Daniel had given her. She worked at the cafe part-time, studied at night, and slowly, grades that once seemed impossible turned into victories. She excelled in business and management courses, fascinated by how numbers, people, and strategy built companies. Professors noticed her sharp mind and relentless drive. "You think differently," one told her. "You see opportunities where others see problems." That praise fueled her. Years passed, and Emily not only completed her high school equivalency but earned a scholarship for college. Daniel was there every step of the way, cheering her on. On graduation day, as she stood in her cap and gown, she searched the crowd until she found him, clapping with tears in his eyes. She walked across the stage, diploma in hand, feeling the weight of every cold night she had survived, every coin tossed at her feet, every sip of coffee that once felt like salvation. Now, she wasn't just surviving. She was rising. After college, Emily dove into the corporate world. It was intimidating, towering offices, sharp suits, endless competition, but she refused to be intimidated. She started at the bottom, as an assistant, learning everything she could, watching how leaders made decisions. Her background made her sharper, hungrier, more resilient than anyone else. She knew struggle, and that made her fearless. Slowly, she climbed. Her ideas impressed managers, her discipline set her apart, and soon promotions followed. Within a decade, Emily transformed from the girl begging outside a cafe to a respected executive with influence and power. But she never forgot where it all began. She often visited Daniel's cafe, now thriving with multiple branches thanks to her strategic advice. Whenever she sat there, she held her coffee cup with reverence, not as a drink, but as a symbol of second chances. Emily's journey reached its peak when she was offered the position of CEO at a rising tech company. Standing in the boardroom on her first day, she gazed at the long table, the city skyline behind her, and felt a wave of emotion. Just years ago, she had sat outside in the cold, unseen, unwanted. Now, she stood at the head of a company, responsible for hundreds of employees, her voice carrying weight and respect. Her story spread quietly at first, employees whispering about her unusual path, but soon, newspapers picked it up. From begging to boardroom, the CEO who once slept on streets. Interviews followed, and Emily became not just a leader but an inspiration. But for Emily, the greatest moment wasn't the applause or the headlines. It was the day she returned to that exact cafe corner where she had once begged. She sat on the pavement, now in a tailored suit, holding a cup of coffee. Passers-by stared, puzzled, until a young homeless girl approached hesitantly, much like Emily once had. Emily smiled, handed her the cup, and whispered, "Drink. You're more than this street. Your life can change." The girl's eyes widened, and Emily knew, a new story had just begun. That night, she visited Daniel. He was older now, his hair grayer, but his smile was the same. "You did it," he said, pride shining in his eyes. Emily shook her head. "We did it. You gave me coffee, and with it, you gave me hope." Daniel raised his cup in a quiet toast. "To hope," he said. Emily nodded, tears brimming. "To hope, and to never underestimating what a single act of kindness can do." From that day forward, Emily made it her mission to open programs for the homeless, offering shelter, education, and jobs. She wasn't just a CEO. She was a reminder that even the smallest gesture, like a cup of coffee, could ignite a fire powerful enough to change lives. And every morning, when she sat in her office with coffee in hand, she remembered the girl she once was, and the stranger who saw her not as a beggar, but as a human being with potential. If this story touched your heart, remember, kindness is never small. A single act can change someone's entire life. So the next time you see someone struggling, don't just walk past, stop, smile, offer a hand. Who knows, you might be the reason they rise from the street to the boardroom. Share this story with your friends, subscribe to Kindness Vibes, and let's spread more hope, more love, and more kindness in the world, one story at a time. If this story touched your heart, remember, kindness is never small. A single act can change someone's entire life. So the next time you see someone struggling, don't just walk past, stop, smile, offer a hand. Who knows, you might be the reason they rise from the street to the boardroom. Share this story with your friends, subscribe to Kindness Vibes, and let's spread more hope, more love, and more kindness in the world, one story at a time.